whakarungo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, they're alive. A father and 3 children missing for 17 days on the wild Waikato west coast wander home, stunning family and everybody else. Where have they been? How did they survive? So many questions. The virtual fence around Auckland will stay padlocked shut even if the city moves down alert levels next week. How will businesses and parents cope with a staycation? And what about the regional towns that rely on Jaffa dollars? We head to Taupō. MIQ, or lack of it, is forcing one of our top athletes to head offshore indefinitely. Gimme more freedom was her plea, so has Britney Spears been liberated. And fancy fruit salad just got a whole lot more expensive. We'll explain why.
Ahi Marie, RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. Waikato police say it has been 17 days of hell for the Marakopa community and the family of missing man Tom Phillips and his 3 children. Mr Phillips and Jada, Maverick and Ember have turned up at their family's farm in the King Country after disappearing earlier this month. An extensive search was suspended when no sign of them was found, but the Waikato West Area Commander Will Loughran says police always held out hope the family would survive.
To happen this way is, it's fantastic for the family. This is a family that experienced 17 days of hell, really. This is a community that experienced 17 days of hell, wondering what had happened to this family and these children. So for the outcome to be what we always wanted, it's fantastic.
Will Loughran says the Phillips family was living in a tent in an area of dense bush. Meanwhile, a local kuia, Nora Haupokia, says it's been a very stressful time, but she's glad it's ended well.
But at the same time, it was sad that he had to do what he did to the community. It's actually quite a sore point of his, really, as far as we're concerned, because we've had to live with this for 3 weeks and we thought we would have to carry on living with it until now that he's come out. Well, that's a blessing.
Nora Haupokia and her whānau took part in the search for the family and provided food and hospitality for the searchers. Aucklanders are being told they will not be able to leave the city, even if it drops COVID levels. 19 new community cases of COVID-19 have been reported today, including one outside the boundary in northern Hauraki. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says case numbers have been volatile, but the outbreak is broadly under control. However, she says regardless of alert level decisions next week, there are no plans to lift the Auckland boundary.
And I think I owe that level of certainty to Aucklanders. With the outbreak as it stands, yes, we are giving full consideration to easing. But what is not in consideration presently is the idea of removing that regional boundary at this time.
However, the National Party leader claims some Aucklanders are starting to lose confidence in the government's COVID-19 response. Judith Collins says people are becoming extremely stressed being locked down and are becoming more anxious. She says keeping the boundary in place if the alert level lowers will be hard on families. A man shot by police in the Auckland suburb of Hillsborough this morning had pointed firearms at officers and the public several times. The incident was sparked by a fleeing driver in Otahuhu shortly before 9 o'clock. The man was shot and a second person was arrested when the car finally stopped at Lilac Grove in Hillsborough. A resident says it was nail-biting as emergency services converged on the area.
There were armed offenders, dog handler units rushing down there. There were paramedics in full armoured body gear, so that was a pretty intense sight to see. And then obviously there were ambulances arriving by the second, and police presence like I've never seen before. It was unreal.
St John Ambulance says the person shot by police is in a critical condition in Auckland City Hospital. A South Taranaki iwi says the Supreme Court's decision to dismiss an appeal by a Seabed mining company sets a huge precedent. Trans-Tasman Resources has lost its bid to overturn a decision preventing it from mining iron sand off the coast. The court has ruled that the Environmental Protection Authority had erred in law when granting consent to Trans-Tasman Resources. The chief executive of Te Kahui o Rauri, Victor Goldsmith, says it's a significant outcome.
It does set a precedent, and I think other iwi will be looking at this particular kaupapa and this judgment. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out from now on.
In dismissing the appeal, the court also ruled that the matter can be referred back to the EPA. It's 5:04. It's the end of an era as a Southland coal mine closes today after more than a century. The Ohai mine was built around large coal deposits discovered in the 1910s, and at its peak, more than 1,000 people lived in the town. Wallace Takitumu Community Board member Kelly Day says she's still hopeful the town has a future. Moving into sport news now, the All Blacks coach Ian Foster admits it was a balancing act selecting the team to face South Africa in Saturday's Rugby Championship final on the Gold Coast. Several changes have been made in the backs, including midfielder Anton Leonard-Brown's return from injury and changes at halfback and on both wings. But Luke Jacobson is the only new face in the forward pack, recovering from illness to start at number 8. The All Blacks secured the Rugby Championship with a narrow win over the Springboks last weekend, but Foster wanted to resist wholesale changes.
We were delighted with the result last week. We weren't as delighted with the performance. And you get that, don't you, through when you go through a season. So, you know, in order to get the lessons, I think putting a large part of the group out again, I think is going to be important. But we've also acknowledging the 5 tests in a row has really given us a chance to freshen up a few areas.
First 5, Richie Mo'unga comes off the bench after completing his 2-week quarantine following his late arrival in Australia. Meanwhile, 6 Argentina players and 2 staff have been kicked out of the competition after an unauthorised trip to New South Wales resort town of Byron Bay. Saturday's test against the Wallabies will still go ahead as Argentina has a squad of 44 in Australia. And that's the news.
Matariki is set to become a public holiday.
Think of it as a little like Easter. Every year, Matariki manifests itself according to where the stars are in the sky.
4 new lizard species are discovered.
We're still finding new species in New Zealand. It's so exciting.
And rats take a secret route into British homes.
I had a dear lady that she was sat doing her usual familiar thing on the toilet and a rat popped up.
A more welcome visitor in your home. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. Northland, Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula will see cloudy periods with a few showers tonight and a period of rain overnight as well. Waikato, Taupo and Bay of Plenty will see scattered rain clearing by this evening, mostly cloudy in western areas tomorrow with isolated light showers and mainly fine elsewhere. Waitomo to Wellington, also Taumaranui, Taihape, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Scattered showers clearing from the south this evening and overnight. Possible thunderstorms for coastal Gisborne this evening. Fine tomorrow, apart from late cloud in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury will be mostly fine, however a few showers in Marlborough clearing tonight. Bulla and Westland will be fine, apart from a few showers north of Hokitika. Otago, except for Clutha and Dunedin, will be fine apart from areas of cloud. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland will see a few showers clearing from Dunedin overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, showers clearing tonight but returning tomorrow. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāmere Friday. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi, Sarah. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The worst kept secret is out. Auckland school children won't be going anywhere for the holidays, with the boundaries set to firmly stay put for some time yet. More on that shortly, but we begin tonight with some joy. Something we've not had much of in recent times is the tiny King Country settlement of Marakopa welcomed news a family of 4 missing for 17 days are safe and well. 34-year-old Thomas Phillips and his 3 children, Jada 8, Maverick 6 and Ember 5, went missing in mysterious circumstances on September 13th. And as Andrew McRae reports, a large search for them failed to find any sign until they walked into the family farmhouse this morning.
Police say they never gave up hope of finding the family, but the official search was suspended last week. Waikato West Area Commander Will Loughran says they've kept an open mind throughout the investigation. There were no leads until yesterday.
We were notified yesterday morning of a sighting of a male and children on a bike on Mangatawa Road. After the sighting, police deployed a fixed-wing plane and drones to the area, but the family was not located. We were then notified this morning that the family had returned to the family farm.
He says police are in the early stages of finding out exactly what happened, but can confirm the family were living in a tent about 15 kilometres from where Mr Phillips' ute was found on Kiritahiri Beach 17 days ago.
They were in dense bush area, and that's kind of the initial information we've got around their living situation over the last couple of weeks. Again, we don't know if they were in one location or if they had moved around the area, but what we do know is that the family were living in some form of tent in dense bush area.
Inspector Loughran says Mr Phillips was a capable bushman and knew how to look after himself. He says the search was extensive.
As part of that, we prioritised what areas were of interest that we needed to thoroughly search, and the location of where they were is an area that was part of our search area, and that was covered aerially by way of a Coast Guard plane.
He says police have been working on a number of scenarios.
We utilised the services of experts in terms of scenarios if the family had gone into the ocean, as to the likelihood that we would see clothing and other items. And once we'd got to a point where those items hadn't presented, we started to ensure that we were following all other scenarios that were possible.
Inspector Loughran says having the family safe and well is a great relief.
It is extraordinary. It was a scenario that we always had hoped. In reality, we wanted the family to be alive. To happen this way is, it's fantastic for the family. This is a family that experienced 17 days of hell, really. This is a community that experienced 17 days of hell, wondering what had happened to this family and these children. So for the outcome to be what we always wanted, it's fantastic.
Tom Phillips' sister, Rosie Pethlebridge, says he simply wandered into their parents' house after a stint in the bush. She says their faith never faltered, and it's the best result they could have imagined.
My understanding is that he has been chilling out in the bush with the kids. They're all safe, they're all well. Yeah, we're just absolutely over the moon that this is the outcome. Been pretty worried about lots of other things that could have happened, and ending up in the sea or accident or something befalling them, but just absolutely over the moon that they are all good and we're all going to be reunited soon.
The community was left breathing a sigh of relief as well. Otorohanga District Mayor Max Baxter says the search has been challenging for everyone.
As you could appreciate, it's been an absolutely extensive search for this family, and I suppose questions started to be asked when you're going 3 weeks down the track and nothing had surfaced at all. So, commend the police and obviously carrying on and following through on this and coming to a fantastic ending.
The mother of Tom Phillips and grandmother of Jada, Amber and Maverick told RNZ the family are relieved all four are safe and well. Police say all appropriate support's being provided to Tom and the children, and Tom is helping officers piece together the full story.
Our reporter Robin Martin has been speaking to locals in Marakopa this afternoon, and he joins me now from there. Kia ora, Robin. What do people make of this?
Yeah, hi, Lisa. Look, people are overjoyed that that Tom and the kids have appeared and are alive. That is the overwhelming emotion here. But it would be fair to say that it's kind of like bittersweet. I've been over at Kiritahiri, the beach where the ute was found all those days ago, and spoke to Kuia Nora Hopokia, and she said, they're happy and it's a blessing and it is what they'd always hoped for. But yeah, they're a little bit disappointed that this seems to have been, of Tom's making, and similar opinions have been shared with me over at Marakopa, where I'm parked up at the moment. A couple of people who would only speak to me off the record said, look, this is what we always said had happened. This is what we told the police. They're really happy that the kids are okay, but they're a little bit grumpy with Tom. That would be fair to say.
Thanks for joining us, Robin. That is Robin Martin there. And if you're just catching up on the news, the family that went missing near Marakopa, they have all been found alive and well, the father and 3 children. It is 14 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere ake nei. Coming up, Olympic medalist Tom Walsh on what MIQ means for his career. Aucklanders, cancel your school holiday ski trips and whānau visits across the border. The Prime Minister's announced the super city will remain shut off from the rest of the country, regardless of a drop in alert levels. The hard border also means no one coming into the super city these school holidays, killing foot traffic in the CBD as Auckland counts down to the busy pre-Christmas season. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Cabinet will decide on Monday if Auckland will be able to ease its COVID-19 restrictions. However, Jacinda Ardern has already poured cold water on any suggestions this could be the last week Auckland is cordoned off from the rest of the country.
What is not in consideration presently is the idea of removing that regional boundary at this time. And so I'm very happy to give that clarity. I know that will be hard to hear, but it is not one of the things we're currently considering.
COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins has also indicated a move to a standard level 2 is probably not going to happen.
I think it is increasingly likely that rather than seeing a sudden shift from a level 3 to a level 2, we would see restrictions progressively removed over a period of time. And I hope that next week, if that's the course that we're going to take, we'll be able to sort of map out a little bit more about what that might look like.
Nationals leader Judith Collins is warning the patience of Aucklanders is wearing thin.
All the information I'm getting from my friends in Auckland and constituents in Auckland is that people are becoming extremely stressed by lockdowns, this extensive lockdown with no end in sight for them.
She says it's clear the government's COVID response has changed since the Delta outbreak.
The government needs to admit that the elimination strategy has ended effectively, certainly in Auckland.
But during Parliament's question time, Ms Ardern said the government strategy has not changed.
Mr Speaker, as I've said many times before, our strategy all the way through has been a stamp it out strategy. Zero tolerance for COVID cases, but that does not mean we will have zero. And so we've all said all the way through that we maintain that strategy while we are vaccinating New Zealanders.
Judith Collins also wants the government to look at extending the wage subsidy to alert level 2. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government will consider if any further support in Auckland is needed once an alert level decision has been made.
Bear in mind that we have another round of the wage subsidy scheme that opens on Friday. We have the resurgent support payment, the further payment coming if anywhere in New Zealand is at level 2 or above. So there is ongoing economic support still going out regardless of whether we change any settings.
But in the meantime, the Prime Minister says high vaccine rates will be the key to lifting all restrictions. To help with that, the government has today announced it will be offering a free taxi service to those who need transport to get vaccinated.
And for more on this, I'm joined by Heart of the City CEO Viv Beck. Hi Viv, what is the immediate fallout from this announcement?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty now around what lies ahead. Businesses are doing it tough in Auckland. We've had extended level 4, level 3 now and ongoing uncertainty ahead. I think even we had asked actually for certainty this week around the financial support going into level 2. I think that's essential. And I think there will be a lot of disappointment around the news around the border.
So, Viv, when you say about financial security, are you asking for them to, when Auckland moves to level 2, you still think there should be some kind of subsidy?
Yes, I think businesses across Auckland have been hit severely in terms of this, the extended lockdowns, and certainly in the city centre we've got the perfect storm with people heading home and we don't see them until they're back. So, it's a very, very severe situation for many. There are a lot that can work remotely successfully and that's great, but for those who can't, it just hits them again and again and again.
What would you want that financial support to look like?
Well, there've been different proposals put up by different groups. We think a simple thing would be to extend the wage subsidy, and we have also supported the call to have the resurgence payment weekly, because the fixed costs continue, and the whole effect of this is cumulative. You know, when we go back into level 1 and people come out, it's great, but for many businesses, they're just paying off debt, and they just get on their feet again and gone down again. So that would be a simple thing that would be as simple as a government decision to do it. We don't need to set anything up to execute it.
What difference do you reckon level 3 has made? Because that's an extra 300,000 workers moving about the city.
Well, I can tell you it makes very little difference in the city centre. Yes, there are more people around and construction is happening, which is great, but it is still 90% down in terms of consumer spending. So we've gone from sort of $25 million loss to sort of 23, 24. So, you know, it's hardly anything. It's a drop in the bucket.
So paint a picture for us. What does it look like compared to what it would normally look like downtown?
Well, it's very, very quiet. I mean, level 4 to level 3, you can notice that there are more people around it, and it's great to have construction going again. And there certainly is some more people than level 4, but it's very, very quiet.
So how much would Auckland businesses be reliant on, say, school holiday trade, people coming to Auckland from other areas?
Oh, absolutely they are. I mean, we normally have hundreds of thousands of people. So to have it locked down like this, and then the prospect of uncertainty, I mean, people are dying to get going again and welcome people. I think that's one of the hardest things for the hospitality sector. I mean, they're used to hosting, and the ability to trade again is vital. So having school children coming, students, you know, they're not back till after Christmas. That's a blow. But I think people are ready to go. We just need the opportunity to get hosting again.
The thing is, though, Viv, have we not formed other habits, right? We talked about this last lockdown, but this has been really long, right? And businesses have realised they can do things other ways. So is the city environment, as we knew it before, dead and gone?
No, I don't think so. I think there are many things that are unique to the city centre, and that's around arts and culture and entertainment and our dining offering and the shopping. There are things that you can do here that are different from other places, and we can see that every time we go to level 1. People come out for events like Lion King, and, you know, there are definitely things that are different. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that people... I mean, working from home suits some, but there are some that are completely over it now. And I'm getting some good vibe from some of the office property people saying that actually people are really keen to get back. So I don't think I think we've got a permanent shift in terms of more flexibility for people, and some businesses it suits down to the ground. But I think there are more and more costs starting to appear in terms of culture and just all the benefits of having people together in one place. So I think there are changes, but I think we are going to see, as soon as it's safe to get back, we will see people keen to get back to working with people in a live setting again.
Isn't there one silver lining, Viv? You've got all these Aucklanders who've got nowhere to go but Auckland.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I know there'll be people disappointed that they can't get where they were planning to go, but actually it is a great opportunity to stay put and support local.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's Viv Beck, Heart of the City CEO there. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you make of that? The Prime Minister has said pretty much the hard border will remain around Auckland, even if the super city moves down a level next week. Where does that leave you? Did you have holiday plans? Which way were you going? Into or out of Auckland? And does it affect your business? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Cabs, coupons and coffees are being offered as health authorities try to keep Auckland's vaccination campaign rolling along. 83% of eligible Aucklanders have now had their first jab, but some health officials now believe reaching the golden 90% mark is out of reach ahead of next week's big decision. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe report from South Auckland.
First shot, bro, now Vaxi-taxi. You've heard of taking vaccines to the people, but this is about taking people to the vaccines.
Today we launch another initiative to see the increase in the uptake of the COVID-19 vaccination program in partnership with Blue Bubble Taxis.
That's right, your bog standard Auckland co-op cab unveiled as a vaccine vehicle of sorts. Vaccination Rollout Clinical Director Dr. Anthony Jordan's standing in front of two of them, a standard sedan and a people mover for larger whānau. It's the latest attempt to boost jab numbers, just today crawling to 83% of Aucklanders who have had their first Pfizer shot. 48% have had both doses.
We're really trying to make sure that we have no barriers for accessing vaccinations throughout Auckland.
Also here is Dr. Sarah Hartnell, who says the taxis are a next step on the back of those dozen buses launched a couple of weeks back. Speaking of the buses, which aren't all out on the road just yet, how are they going?
In terms of the buses, we've now vaccinated 3,500 people, almost 3,500 people with the buses, and we're really, really pleased that we've been able to reach those people.
It's an average of 250 jabs daily across the buses, so I asked Dr. Jordan, is he happy with those numbers?
Success for us is reaching those communities that may not have necessarily had the offer of a vaccination, so every vaccination counts for us. So those numbers are great.
As for that 90% first jab goal the government previously said it wants to hit by the time it makes its alert level decision next Monday, well, Dr. Jordan says he wouldn't bet the house and car on it.
I don't think I would. That's because I love my house and my car. And houses are very expensive in Auckland.
A short drive south, Manurewa Marai's bus, Turbro, has pulled up to Papakura High School. A gentle trickle of students, family and neighbours roll up, about 50 in the first couple of hours. Incentives haven't featured massively in health officials' plan of attack, but Principal Simon Craggs says the school's changing the game.
Anyone who comes down after their shot will get a free coffee or hot chocolate from the espresso bar over there. And then when they finish that, they can come over into the draw for a number of really cool prizes, $300 ASICS or Timberland voucher, passes to Wet or Whitewater Park. Everyone gets free zoo tickets. We've got kai packs, 900 family-sized Westie pies that have been donated.
Papakura High School old boy and Auckland councillor Daniel Newman says the time has come to dangle the carrot.
Well, I'm getting a bit tired of bureaucracy getting in the way of a good outcome, so I was determined that we're going to get vaccinations here in South Auckland, and I was determined we're going to incentivise people to come down here and get jabbed, whatever it takes. So we've been working on this for a couple of weeks. It'll be the first high school to do this, but it won't be the last. We've got James Cook High School on Monday and Tuesday next week, and it needs to roll out from there.
So it's taxis and treats, the newest additions in a desperate effort to keep Auckland's vaccination campaign inching forward.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put that piece from our two Nicks up on our Facebook page so you can check out the video. It is 26 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. One of the country's most beloved athletes is considering picking up his put and moving offshore because of the constraints of MIQ. Tom Walsh won bronze in the shot put at the last two Olympics after the Tokyo Games. He stayed overseas for a few other meets and is now back home in MIQ in Christchurch. He lays out his plan from here.
Well, I'm back in New Zealand hopefully until March, which is going to be good. I've got one more day left in MIQ, and then around March I have World Indoors in Serbia, and so I might be away from March until September, mid-September next year, depending on MIQ and quarantine and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so when you say depending on MIQ, is the whole system trying to get in to isolate? Well, is it making life difficult for you as an athlete?
I think it definitely is, for sure. And not only for me as an athlete, but also business people and also people coming home to see their, whether it's loved ones who are, close to passing away or a new baby in the family or so forth. So I think it's definitely, for me, my point of view next year, I can't afford to come home and spend 2 weeks in quarantine between mid-March and mid-June when, my real, international season and World Championships and Commonwealth Games are. So that's kind of the big reasons.
Can you survive without competing on the international stage?
No, I can't. I can't. I don't think. One, I can't be the athlete I want to be, because I think personally, for me to be the best in the world, or to try to be the best in the world, I've got to throw against the best guys in the world on a regular basis, not once a year or something like that. And also financially, it's where I make my money. And otherwise, I'll be strapping on that tool belt and doing a lot more hours on the building site, which I don't do as much anymore.
So, without being brutal about it, Tom, MIQ, well, potentially could kill your career. That's why you're having to move out of New Zealand.
Yeah, that's why I have to move out of New Zealand for prolonged periods of time. And I think that's what other sports people and maybe other business people are finding, that their jobs entitled, they just need to do so much travel and require so much travel for their jobs to do what needs to be done. And with the MIQ situation at the moment, and not having any slots open at all until, not having any slots open at all, full stop at the moment, I can't plan, I can't even book one for March next year if I even wanted one. So, it does make it hugely challenging, and for me, a sad thing that I have to spend more time overseas and away from home.
After the Olympics, you had other competitions that you went to, so you came back a bit later than the big squad of the Olympic team heading back. So how did you get MIQ this time?
Yeah, so I was reasonably lucky that I knew that was going to happen, that I was going to stay away after the Olympics. And so I booked my MIQ spot back in May and kind of picked a rough date where I thought the last competition would have been done by, and then kind of got a slot then. So I had to hang around in Europe 3 or 4 days after my last competition, so it matched up with the flight coming back in my MIQ spot.
There are a lot of teams that seem to be getting secured spots, right? They go through a slightly different system. A committee of ministers looks at the application for teams, but as an individual, are there any other options? As an individual sports person, are there any other options for you other than diving into the lottery?
No, there is not. That's the only way that I can come back. If I choose not to come back with the Olympic team, I have to come sort my own way back into the country.
Well, how do you think the two situations compare in terms of the way teams are treated and the way individual athletes are treated?
Yeah, look, I think it's... I don't personally agree with it. I've got a lot of mates or people that I know now that are part of those teams, and it's good for them, but it's not good for the individual athletes who essentially are doing the same thing as what they're doing overseas. So, and I'm not saying that sports people are more important than business people or people needing to come home for family reasons or whatever, but I think we need to come up with a better solution to, especially when someone's job's involved in this, their requirement to travel overseas on a regular basis. There needs to be a better option for them coming home on a regular basis.
Tom, where will home base be if you're offshore for extended months at a time?
Yeah, I've got a good base in Athens, Georgia, in America. So it's a university town. It's got everything we could possibly need. So it's a home away from home, but still, I do love being in New Zealand and and back to where I belong.
Hey, very seriously, how has the food been in MIQ?
Look, it's more the quantity of food has been on a little bit short for me. But look, I've phoned up the reception here, and I've got double portions on some of the meals, so I've got by just fine.
And I hear there's such a thing called Dana deliveries as well.
Yes, Dana, my girlfriend, drops off. I think she's dropped off 3 or 4 parcels now, that just wee snacks here and there. And she also bakes this Black Forest fudge, which is outstanding. So she's brought in a bit of that for me too, which is quite nice.
And that was Tom Walsh talking to us from MIQ, his last night there tonight. E te iwi e haere ake nei I a checkpoint. The government ditches another benefit sanction. Fancy fruit salad got a whole lot pricier as COVID freight issues take root. And she's stronger than yesterday. Britney Spears one step closer to freedom. We crossed live to Los Angeles for the latest. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Anei a Sarah mina pita pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Waikato police say it has been 17 days of hell for the Marokopa community and the family of missing man Tom Phillips and his 3 children. They say the Phillips family was living in a tent in an area of dense bush. A local kuia involved in the search says they're relieved they've walked out of the bush alive, but they do wonder why he did that. Aucklanders are being told they will not be able to leave the city even if it drops COVID levels. The Prime Minister says case numbers have been volatile, but the outbreak is broadly under control. National says people are becoming extremely stressed and more anxious about being locked down. There are 2 new suburbs of interest in the Auckland Delta outbreak. People in Henderson and Papakura are urged to get tested whether they have COVID-19 symptoms or not. Matariki is one step closer to being recognised as a public holiday after Te Kāhui o Te Matariki Public Holiday Bill passed its first reading in Parliament. A man shot by police in the Auckland suburb of Hillsborough this morning has pointed firearms at officers and the public several times. The incident was sparked by a fleeing driver in Otahuhu shortly before 9 o'clock. A resident says it was nail-biting as emergency services converged on the area. A Taranaki iwi says the Supreme Court's decision to dismiss an appeal by a Seabed mining company sets a huge precedent. Trans-Tasman Resources has lost its bid to overturn a decision preventing it from mining iron sand off the coast. The Ohai coal mine in Southland has closed today after more than a century in operation. The Ohai mine was built around large coal deposits discovered in the 1910s, and at its peak, more than 1,000 people lived in the town. And finally, life begins at 50, it seems, certainly in the golfing life of New Zealand player Stephen Alka, who has won nearly $600,000 in his first 6 weeks on the lucrative Seniors Tour in the United States. Alka joined the tour after turning 50 in July, having previously battled away on the full and secondary tours in the US and Europe. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Thanks, Sarah. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa anai ko Nona Peltier, who joins us to talk business. Nona, the Reserve Bank is looking at a possible digital currency to sit alongside physical cash. Does that mean, well, cash is a gone burger?
No, it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, the Reserve Bank has been looking at the future of cash for a few years and have suggested that there's very little reason why they would get rid of cash. In fact, they're going to take steps to protect it. And that's because it's widely used, not just here in New Zealand by a lot of people, but also in the Pacific where it works as a local currency. So no, the future of cash is assured. What we're talking about here is the future of money beyond cash. And that is turning our attention then to digital currency. We've heard about Bitcoin and that sort of thing. What the Reserve Bank is looking at is what they call a central bank digital currency. Now, we've been hearing about that in different, constituencies around the world. And it's something that's probably the time has come for the Reserve Bank to look at more seriously. They've talked about it from the edges and said, well, it wasn't a really big concern some years ago. But look, it's growing in popularity and they want to make sure that that New Zealanders have every choice when it comes to how they spend their hard-earned dollars.
Hey, no, I want people to get in touch, whether they use cash or not. And I'm especially interested with COVID, because the way we do transactions now, sort of you don't get close to people, everything's supposed to be contactless. So let us know, do you still use cash? Text us on 2101. Would love to hear from you. And let's now talk about big retailers, Nona. So they're still doing okay, even though the pandemic is pretty challenging for business?
Well, it seems so. We've had a report now today. Now, we've heard from the Warehouse, we've heard from Briscoe Group, we've heard from some number of organizations, retailers and so on, big ones, mind you, that are doing pretty well. It's the smaller ones that have struggled a bit, and certainly the ones that haven't adopted technology. Now, the latest to report is Hallenstein Group. That's the Glassons. People will know about women and men's clothing there. Look, they posted a 20% gain in their net profit for the year ending August. So they made $33 million, and that's comparing with $27 million the year earlier. And their sales were up 20% as well. And they say that that's really strong sales growth considering the challenging environment. One of the things they did notice is that they had a 25% 25% of all of their sales are now done online. However, it looks that because we're in this lockdown situation, not just here in New Zealand, but in Australia, where Hallenstein has quite a considerable business there, they're saying that sales are down about 19% so far this year. If we get the same kind of bounce we saw in the last round of lockdowns, well, hopefully we'll start to see some very strong gains there, not just for Hallenstein, but perhaps for other retailers too.
Running shoes on, Nona, a quick sprint through the market.
Yes, well, look, the local top 50 index, it rose 1.2%. That was a 156-point gain. That's 13,276 today. That's in line with what we've seen in Australia, but not what we've been seeing in Asia, where they're still worried about the bad debts with the Evergrande company there. And the New Zealand dollar, well, it's steady from this morning, but look, it's been dropping a bit, and that's a U.S. dollar story, still at 68.8 US cents, 95.5 Australian and 51.1 pence.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, that's Nona Peltier with our business news. The price of tropical fruits like pineapples, melon and mango could skyrocket this summer due to soaring freight costs. The pandemic means fewer flights are arriving and ships are often facing weeks of delays before getting here. Rural reporter Sally Murphy has more.
If you haven't been able to get hold of some of your usual fruit and veg, you can blame COVID. Imported fruit and veg make up a quarter of our produce bills, but freight issues are making it hard to get into the country. President of sector group United Fresh, Jerry Prendergast, says that's resulting in gaps in the market.
We would have traditionally had mangoes, for example, even out of South America. There's a mango season where you'd be pulling tremendous amount of volume in container shipments, different to air flights. Because we're not sure of its arrival dates, because there's so many delays and uncertainties, we're finding we're simply not taking the risk in bringing that product in.
Mr Prendergast says some importers are trying to get fruit on planes, but that's not proving very reliable either.
Most importers that are bringing produce into New Zealand are looking at every option that's available to them. They're looking at different forms of shipping, i.e. moving product from point A to point B to try and actually eliminate those shortages.
And it comes at a cost.
Utilising alternative options, again, air freight on grapes, which we haven't traditionally seen in this country for a number of years, is being used currently to cover those gaps. So when you do see product that's air freighted in, you will see a higher price on that product, there's no question, compared to sea freight.
Auckland-based company Fresh Direct runs a large fruit and vegetable import program, bringing in produce during our low season, as well as varieties not grown here. Produce import manager at Fresh Direct, Doug Hamilton, says they're working incredibly hard to keep supply consistent, but at the end of the day, if the ships aren't coming, they're not coming.
Pre-2020, there would be a ship, for example, from the States every week. Now you're lucky to get one every 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. The ships are apart, so the product can't get on these vessels. Not all the product there's not space for all the product.
And California grapes are a prime example.
You know, the ships come in, there's not enough space on the vessels to put enough grapes to cover a 3 to 4 week gap in supply, so we're constantly running out of product.
Doug Hamilton says supply and demand means consumers are paying more and prices are only set to get higher.
The prices are going up because the cost of freight is going up. The buy price for these products is virtually the same. It's the cost of freight that's putting it up, and the shortages when they're here are putting the prices up. But the actual cost of buying the product at its source hasn't changed much from other years.
Mr Hamilton says one positive is with less fruits like grapes, pineapples and pawpaw being imported, people might eat more locally grown fruits like apples and pears.
Those who fought tirelessly against the mining of tons of iron sands off the coast of South Taranaki believe the end of seabed mining is here. The Supreme Court decision has dismissed an appeal by Trans-Tasman Resources to overturn a decision preventing it from mining iron sand off the coast. Marnie Dunlop reports.
It has been a long legal battle, with mana whenua, other environmentalists and fishing groups fighting the consent from the outset of the company's application. Trans-Tasman Resources got the go-ahead from the Environmental Protection Agency in 2017, but Kiwis Against Seabed Mining, Ngāti Ruanui, Ngā Rauru Kitahi, Greenpeace and other environmental and fishing groups successfully fought the approval through courts. Ngāti Ruanui helped lead the almost decade-long opposition, which involved a number of court battles and protests. Debbie Ngarewa Peka led Ngāti Ruanui, and the fight against Trans-Tasman Resources accelerated her into politics. She says today is victorious and precedent-setting.
Just emotional, extremely emotional. It's been a heavy kaupapa for our people to carry, and not everyone made it to this line, the finishing line. So it's just hugely emotional, overwhelmed. But also very humbled because we knew this was the only decision that was the right decision.
She is calling on the government to ban seabed mining in Aotearoa and believes this decision will help prompt that. Other mana whenua, Ngā Rauru Kitahi, was also among the claimants. Chief Executive of Te Kāhui o Rauru, Victor Goldsmith, says this is a huge win, and other iwi will have a close eye on this ruling.
It does set a precedent, and I think other iwi will be looking at this particular kaupapa and this judgment. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out from now on.
Trans-Tasman Resources appealed to the Supreme Court in November last year, arguing that the Court of Appeal had given Treaty of Waitangi principles too much weight. It claimed the court leaned too strictly on environmental protection and should have considered economic benefits as well. In its decision, the Supreme Court disagreed, falling on the side of environmental protection, in particular as it related to marine mammals and seabirds. Legal counsel for Ngā Rauru Kitahi, Natalie Coates, says the court gave a strong and clear direction about the central role that Te Tiriti has in the Constitution and in the law that will guide how all treaty clauses and legislation are interpreted in the future.
The Supreme Court was really clear about how the treaty clause should be interpreted, should be given a broad, generous interpretation, which I think has a flow-on effect, not just in terms of how this particular piece of legislation is interpreted, but will go to how you interpret all treaty clauses in legislation.
Ms Coates says tikanga was also affirmed as being part of the law. Another claimant, Kiwis Against Seabed Mining spokesperson Cindy Baxter, was overjoyed by the news. She believes this is the end of seabed mining in Aotearoa.
Now we think, this is really the end of seabed mining in New Zealand. Because basically the court ruled that if such an activity was to cause material damage to the seafloor or to the environment, then it should not be allowed to go ahead. So they upheld the environmental bottom line that is in the legislation, and it's very, very clear that there's just no way they'd be able to get that across the line.
RNZ has approached Trans-Tasman Resources for comment.
It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki na pita pita kōrero after the news at 6. How will Taupo cope without Aucklanders during the school holidays? Mayor David Trewavis is live. New Zealand will welcome 5 times the usual number of new residents by the end of next year. In what the government describes as the biggest immigration decision in living memory, 165,000 migrants and their families today became eligible to make New Zealand their permanent home. Our immigration reporter Jill Bonnet has more.
Anna Burkhardt is one of the founders of the Migrants NZ Forum, which has 54,000 members.
My alarm went off at 6 o'clock and I woke up to 37 messages. Since then, my phone has been going non-stop.
Anyone who's been in New Zealand more than 3 years on eligible work visas can apply, and those arriving more recently can qualify if their job or pay warrants it. It's a move welcomed by the business, agricultural and health sectors. But Ms Burkhardt says migrants' celebrations are more muted as they're wary that the devil may be in the detail.
Very mixed reaction. The people that have been in the skilled migrant residence queue the longest, we're talking November 2019, they feel quite upset about it at this stage because they tend to think they're just, after waiting almost 2 years in one queue, just being moved into the next queue.
3,000 doctors and nurses are among those waiting, and some had given up and gone home. Waikato GP Anne Solomon says they've learned not to get their hopes up.
There's a sort of learnt scepticism now that we don't know. Until we see it in our hand, we won't really believe it. But it could be another 14 months, because it's December you apply and then it could take a year. We have to maintain sort of healthy scepticism until we really see the results. And then there will be a huge sigh of relief.
She's been waiting for a year, her eldest daughter paying international fees at university, while her daughter, leaving school this year, can't work until the visa lands. 34,000 people have been waiting up to 2 years for their skilled migrant or work to residence visas to be approved. Another 26,000 people have been waiting up to 18 months for news on when they could apply. Events manager Tom Findon has been in the country since 2017 and applied for residence in November 2019. He's happy for others getting today's news, but it came too late for him.
I'm super happy for everyone, don't get me wrong, that could now not have to go through what we did, but for it to be bittersweet, and the fact that we've just had to pay so much, do so much to get here, and then all of a sudden they're just going to say, oh sweet, here's a pathway to residency for everyone else.
Having just paid $1,400 in legal and visa costs, he feels an apology at this stage would be hollow. IT consultant Shatish Bamal, who was granted residence in August, is happy for the migrants who got good news today, but disappointed for what others have been put through.
There have been a lot of suffering. There was a lot of mental torture and have to deal with all the stress and uncertainty. So an apology would be definitely amazing.
It doesn't seem likely. The Minister Chris Farfoy repeatedly refused to apologise today, instead acknowledging the disruption delays have caused. The waiting continues for others. Not all work visas qualify. And with no suggestion of extra immigration staff to implement the massive residence drive, migrants are holding off on the celebrations.
After 13 years is the toxic relationship between pop star Britney Spears and her father over. Fans of the Baby One More Time singer are celebrating after an LA judge suspended her father Jamie Spears as conservator over her estate. Back in June, Britney Spears spoke out in court slamming the arrangement and accusing her father of abuse and saying she just wanted her life back. Journalist and entertainment correspondent Sean Mandel joins me now from Los Angeles. So Sean, her father's out, but is Britney actually free?
She's not free yet, but she certainly is free from her father's influence on her life and certainly having any sort of legal power to control her life. The conservatorship is still in place and will be in place actually at least until November 12th, which is when the court is going to be reconvening for a hearing that her attorney, Matthew Rosengart, said he believes will be the termination point, that is where the conservatorship will really come to an end. But today, actually, it's very interesting because Britney's attorney was not arguing that the conservatorship should end immediately. Their focus was on getting Jamie removed from the conservatorship. He's been suspended from the conservatorship. And then in the meantime, having someone replace him, an accountant that was actually of her and her lawyer's choosing. Now, the reason for that is so that Britney and her lawyer can have access to all the documents that her father will have to turn over about the conservatorship and how it was run and managed over the past 13 years. If the conservatorship had ended today, those documents, Jamie Spears would not legally be required to pass those over to Britney's lawyer and to her new conservator, this accountant. And really what Britney and her attorney are looking for here is potential civil action that they can take in court against her father or against those who manage the conservatorship, as well as potential criminal action if they find something in there among the files that does show a criminal act being committed by either Jamie or anyone else involved in the conservatorship.
So, Sean, that's the kind of backroom legal dealings and the exchange of documents. But on a practical level, does her day-to-day life change in any way from now?
Absolutely, because what's going to happen from now is that there is going to be way more leniency and way more flexibility for what she can do in her everyday life. Because Jamie is not the one making the decisions about she can't leave the house until she takes this medication and her medication has been changed, or she can only have access to X number of dollars per month. Now it is going to be a accountant who doesn't have any sort of skin in the game, if you will, other than him wanting to be a good financial advisor who will allow her access to her money. So instead of only giving her an allowance, he'll say, well, okay, you have this vast fortune. Here's what I think is responsible for you to do. If she wants to go and pull out $30 million, he might deny that. But if she wants to go and spend, $1,000 on a handbag or something to celebrate, I think that that's something that he would most likely approve, whereas that's something that she's talked about. She hasn't even been able to pay for dinners with her friends sometimes when she was under her father's control in the conservatorship. So little things like that will absolutely change.
So speaking of celebrations, has there been any reaction from, the Free Britney movement or also the woman herself?
Absolutely, from both. So what we've heard from Britney herself is that her lawyer said that she was in absolute tears when she heard the news and actually in shock, in a state of disbelief that it had happened, because she had truly felt that this was never going to change, that the conservatorship wasn't going to end, but more importantly, that her father was never going to, have his control released from her life, basically. And then in terms of the crowd, there was a massive crowd assembled outside the downtown Los Angeles courthouse there. A rally was being held, a unity rally is what it was being called. People came in from out of town, out of state, all over the country here in the U.S. To attend that rally. Streets were closed down. There's a video going around of people where you can actually hear the crowd the moment they hear from an inside court reporter that Jamie has been removed from the conservatorship, which is what a lot of these activists have been fighting for. The elation in the crowd is absolutely palpable. And I will say as well, the one other thing we know about Britney and where she stands after this is that she has posted a video on her Instagram of her. It looks like she's in Hawaii. She has a house in Maui, and there's been some, I've had some sources and heard some people rumbling that may be where she is and where she's sort of been taking in this news. And that seems to have been confirmed by her Instagram post. And she's talked about how Hawaii is one of her happy places. So it makes a lot of sense.
Really good to talk to you, Sean. That's Sean Mandel, journalist and entertainment correspondent, joining us live there from Los Angeles. Ohai is today closing the books on its more than century-long association with coal. The small western Southland settlement sprang up around large coal deposits discovered in the 1910s, but its time's up. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown visited the town and spoke to locals about its history and future.
For over 100 years, Ohai has been a coal town. Visiting on a cold and blustery day, there's a whiff of coal in the air, as many of the town's residents rely on it for not only heating, but even heating their water. In its heyday, more people were working underground in the coal mines surrounding the settlement than call Ohai home today. But as of this afternoon, the coal mine has closed its gates for the final time. Bruce Allen, who's known as Carter to the locals, a nickname he earned in his days underground, says it's a sad day for the town.
It's the end of an era, Just only a couple of years ago, Walter Guthrie, an old friend of mine, rugby player and schoolmate, he put the book out. I've got it sitting in the passage just there, but he should have just waited a wee bit longer, and he's got to put the end on it, That would have been the end,
Bruce Allen spent 4 decades underground, first starting at the mines as a 15-year-old above ground. He's seen Ohai through boom times and bad times, and still fondly remembers when it was a town of more than 1,000 people.
The town had over 1,200 people in it. We had baker shop in Ohai, baker shop in Nightcaps, we had 5 grocer shops, 2 bootmakers, you name it. We had a post office bank.
But mechanisation of the underground workings marked the beginning of the end. In the 1980s, rounds of redundancies reduced the town to a shell of its former self.
Looking back, without the coal, without a job, you haven't got a town. And it was sad to see the redundancies and, friendships fell out the door.
Between the house occupied by Bruce Allen and the next one his neighbour and old workmate Ray Waghorn calls home sits an empty section. It's a visible sign of the town's decline from its heyday. Mr Waghorn says he's concerned about the town's future.
There's been about 11 houses gone out of the street since we've been here.
Knocked down?
Taken away from town, transported out on the trucks because of the town closing down.
Ray Waghorn says there's plenty of coal still in the ground, and he believes it's quality coal and there's no reason it shouldn't be used.
It seems a town that's built on coal is now a town without coal, which is like a pub with no beer.
Because of the town's age, many of the homes were built with coal ranges for cooking, heating and heating water. Mr Waghorn has just installed a $10,000 fire to burn coal and says he's too old to consider chopping up trees for firewood. Over on nearby David Street, I find Sharon Ovsovsky. Like a growing number of people in the town, she's relocated in recent years from elsewhere in New Zealand to enjoy a mortgage-free retirement.
I've got a destructor in the kitchen which heats the water, the hot water. I don't have any electric hot water there. And I use peat coal for that. So I don't know what I'm going to do once, the mine closes up.
She's renovating her home and will be able to connect an electric hot water heater in future. But she fears some of the town's more vulnerable residents may be left in the cold, literally. Wallace Takitimu Community Board member Kelly Day tells me the mine's been important, but the town will survive.
Future-wise, Ohai, hey look, we've got many people come through Ohai lately, all walks of life, from the top of the North Island to the bottom. And why are they coming here? Well, the mountains, the view, the people, the local side of it.
Kelly Day says a town store will soon be opening up, showing there is confidence in the area. And she sees houses being done up and signs of a new future every day.
Lots of you getting in touch about the hard border around Auckland, how it's going to stay even if we move alert levels. Simon says, gutted, grandparents can't see kids and we've got another 2 weeks of solo childcare. And this one's interesting. Please let us travel through Auckland to Northland to enjoy some of the holiday with our Northland family, says Jennifer. Another person agrees. When will Northlanders be able to transit through Auckland to points further south? What about convoys like during the Waikato earthquake, supervised by police at organised times? At present, the only way for us to do this is to fly or go by boat.
Ahiahi Mārie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. The police are investigating how the family of 4 survived in the bush for nearly 3 weeks in winter. A search was launched when Tom Phillips and his 3 young children, 8-year-old Jada, 6-year-old Maverick and Amber, aged 5, disappeared from Marokopa, west of Te Kuiti. They walked into the family's King Country farmhouse this morning. Waikato West Area Commander Will Lochran says the family were camping, but it's not clear what they were eating or whether they were moving around.
We know from the family and we knew from our search that he was an experienced bushman and he had the capability to look after himself in the bush area.
Will Lochran says the bush camp was 15 kilometres south of Kiritihiri Beach. The government will consider whether any further support is needed for Auckland when it reviews the COVID alert level next week. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has indicated that the border around Auckland will remain in place, even if the region drops a level. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says the situation will be monitored.
Bear in mind that we have another round of the wage subsidy scheme that opens on Friday. We have the resurgent support payment, the further payment coming if anywhere in New Zealand is at level 2 or above. So there is ongoing economic support still going out regardless of whether we change any settings.
Cabinet will review the alert level settings on Monday. There are 2 new suburbs of interest in the Auckland Delta outbreak. People in Henderson and Papakura are being urged to get tested whether they have COVID-19 symptoms or not. The other suburbs of interest are Clover Park, Mangere, Whāwona, Manurewa, Mount Wellington and Sylvia Park. Otara is no longer on the list. Meanwhile, there are 19 new COVID community cases today, 16 are known household or other close contacts. The Victorian government is slashing the time between Pfizer doses from 6 to 3 weeks as it struggles to control COVID-19. The Australian state is marking a grim milestone with the daily COVID cases over 1,000 for the first time. Almost 1,500 new community cases were reported today, as well as 5 deaths. Victoria's COVID commander, Jerome Weimar, says the hundreds of new cases are due to illegal gatherings.
Around a third of our cases today we think are due directly to those different types of social gatherings as people have dropped their guard and decide that it's a grand final weekend, it's a long weekend, we deserve a bit of a payback, we deserve a nicer time. And that has now translated into at least 500 additional cases from what we would have expected to see today.
New South Wales recorded 941 new community cases today, as well as 6 deaths. Police say a man pointed a firearm at officers and the public multiple times during a pursuit in Auckland today. Acting District Commander Matt Surhoy says the chase began when a suspicious vehicle failed to stop for police. He says the vehicle then erratically drove around suburbs in Auckland before going the wrong way down a southern motorway on-ramp.
On the motorway, the driver has stopped and got out before getting into a vehicle that was parked on the side of the motorway waiting for him. The second vehicle fled at speed and was pursued by police. During the pursuit, the passenger has presented a firearm at a number of times at police and members of the public.
Matt Surhoy says the vehicle ended up on Lilac Grove, where the passenger with the firearm was later shot. He is in a serious but stable condition in hospital. A second benefit sanction has been scrapped, with a law change passing its final hurdle in Parliament. From November, parents who have another child while on the benefit will no longer be forced to return to work when the child turns 1. Instead, work obligations will kick in when the child turns 3. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says a review of other sanctions and obligations is underway, and further changes are possible this term. When the first sanction to be removed was the one that docked the payments of parents who didn't name the other parent of their child. It's 6:04. Wellington City Council is floating an alternative to the government's proposed Three Waters reform. It would see more control and assets handed to the water company owned by the Hutt and Wellington councils. The council has also decided against holding a referendum on whether it should opt out of the Three Waters plan. Moving now into sport news, the All Black coach Ian Foster admits it was a balancing act selecting the team to face South Africa in Saturday's Rugby Championship final on the Gold Coast. There are several changes in the backs, including midfielder Anton Leonard-Brown's return from injury. Last weekend's wings, George Bridge and Will Jordan, have been dropped, replaced by Rieko Ioane and Sevu Reece, while Brad Weber starts at halfback ahead of TJ Perenara. Luke Jacobson is the only new face in the forward pack, recovering from illness, to start at number 8. First 5, Richie Mo'onga comes off the bench after completing his 2-week quarantine following his late arrival in Australia. The new football Ferns coach Jitka Klimkova is being thrown in the deep end with matches against Olympic champions Canada next month. With travel restrictions preventing New Zealand and Australian-based players from taking part, the Ferns squad will predominantly come from Europe and North America. Klimkova says the games against Canada give her a chance to stamp her mark.
The main goal for us in Canada is really to be clear, how do we want to play, to be clear about the roles for the players on the field, off the field. So we are really going to focus mainly on us.
Tickets for next year's Beijing Winter Olympics will be sold to spectators from mainland China only, while unvaccinated athletes will be required to spend 3 weeks in quarantine. The Chinese capital will become the first city to host the Summer and Winter Olympics. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our changing world is on the hunt for astrophysical particles, or how to tell your neutrino from your soft gamma ray. Our Taiwanese correspondent William Yang is on the line from Chicago. He can explain. And physicist and MacGyver fan Dr. Karen Thorne unpicks the plausibility of a MacGyver DIY moment which involved him converting sunlight into a laser beam using just a few crystals and a mirror. Is it possible? Find out on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Mere Friday. Northland, Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula will see cloudy periods with a few showers tonight and periods of rain. Waikato, Taupo and Bay of Plenty will see scattered rain, clearing by this evening, mostly cloudy in western areas tomorrow with isolated light showers and mainly fine elsewhere. Waitomo to Wellington, also Taumarunui, Taihape, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Scattered showers clearing from the south this evening and overnight. Possible thunderstorms for coastal Gisborne this evening. Fine tomorrow, apart from late cloud in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury will be mostly fine, with a few showers in Marlborough clearing overnight. Bulla and Westland will be fine, apart from a few showers north of Hokitika. Otago, except for Clutha and Dunedin, will be fine, apart from a few areas of cloud. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland will see a few showers clearing from Dunedin overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, showers clearing this evening, but returning tomorrow. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Mere Friday. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi mō tērā. No mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Aucklanders can look forward to a staycation this school holidays, with the Prime Minister confirming the region is likely to stay locked in for a while yet, even if restrictions inside the super city's borders are relaxed. And that means a skinny payday for regional businesses relying on holidaying Aucklanders. Last night, Checkpoint revealed the government was looking to keep a border around the region, even if levels shift. Today, Te Pirimia, Jacinda Ardern, said the news would be hard for some people to hear, but she wanted to give some clarity. Taupo is one of the towns that was looking forward to a holiday bump. The Mayor, David Trewavis, joins us now. David, how much are you missing Aucklanders?
Oh, good evening, Lisa. Yes, desperately missing them. Unfortunately, it's just really starting to stack up now. The numbers show some true reductions in our GDP, especially in the hospitality area, tourism and all that sort of thing. So, we're down 35 to 40%. So, yes, very disappointed with today's decisions. But I suppose people that are better qualified than me make these decisions. So, the retailers and everyone's a bit of a sad day down here, that's for sure.
So down 35 to 40%, what does that mean in practical terms for the businesses? How are they, managing to get by?
Yeah, well, just obviously they're talking to their landlords, their suppliers and all that sort of thing. Give us a bit of a stretch, Landlords sort of were quite generous last time, but this time, obviously, they've got a lot of outgoings as well, so they've got to front up to the people that they owe money to. So, yeah, there's some desperate situations out there, and people are not saying too much. And I do worry about the welfare of some of these mum and dad shops and businesses, and perhaps that second car might be just getting traded in. It's really starting to bite in now, and I think we sort of need to move on. We understand the health response, but there needs to be a real focus on economic response now.
Normally in the school holidays, what would town be like?
Our town's normally chocker. We've got a nice tight CBD, which has got, everything available in the CBD. And, of course, we've got Turangi and Mangakino, which are lovely little satellite towns, which bounce off the school holidays as well, they'll just go flat. They're good. They're doing their best. They're putting their wares out in the footpath and trying to motivate a bit of activity. But 35-40% is a big chunk out of the system.
Did you see this one coming?
No. Well, sort of. Obviously, you don't know in these times, do you? You're in and out like the proverbial. So the thing is, people have. A good retailer knows what's going on and trying to do his best. But even those good ones are starting to really, really be a bit despondent now. So, we're trying to look after them as much as we can.
How long do you reckon you can do without the Auckland crowd?
Well, as I say, that's a big chunk, and people do their operating budgets on that income. That's sort of guaranteed pretty much year on year. And our Auckland income has been getting, has been going up exponentially every year because of Taupo being such a desirable place to live now. So central, good flights in from Air New Zealand, all that sort of thing is here, and the beautiful lake, of course, is our gem. So. we're missing them desperately.
Would you be hoping to at least get part of the holidays where there's free travel, or even by, I'm loath to say it, Labour weekend?
Yeah, well, we'll take what we can get. Just implore people get double vax. Get the double vax and you travel. Simple as that. Just this country needs to get vaxxed. If you want to go to a concert this year, or want to go to a motor camp, or wherever you go, you've got to be vaxxed. And simple as it's not that hard to do. And so I just implore people to go and get it, and then we may be able to be released out of the jungle and come down to the provinces.
So, David, given your town's a big hospitality hub, right, and event-based economy as well, would you support people being banned if they aren't double vaxxed to try and encourage them to get a hustle on?
Absolutely, yeah, very much so. I do support that. I think people owe it to their workmates, owe it to their family, that sort of thing. It obviously doesn't 100% stop you getting COVID, but it certainly helps with your recovery. And we know we haven't got the systems to cope with a mass outbreak. But if you get double vaxxed, then you can travel. And even slip over to the Goldie, or if you want to go to the Goldie or Rarotonga or whatever like that down the South Island, don't do it for yourself, do it for your family and do it for your people that surround it. I think it's only fair to live. That's the way we've got to live these days.
Thanks for joining us, David. That's David Trewavis, who is the Taupō Mayor there. Police say a man pointed a gun at officers in the public multiple times during a police pursuit across several Auckland suburbs this morning. Officers followed the car and its two occupants from Otahuhu to a quiet cul-de-sac in Hillsborough, where a dozen police cars poured into the street. One man was shot by police and two men are now in hospital. Chen Liu reports.
The drama began around 8:30 this morning when two police units attempted to stop a suspicious car in Otahuhu. The car reversed into one of the police cars and sped off. Eagle helicopter observed the car continuing to drive erratically through the suburbs of Otahuhu, Mangere and Papatoetoe. The car stopped at an address in Otahuhu and a man got out carrying a firearm. He then drove onto the southern motorway and got into another car parked on the side of the motorway waiting for him. Counties Manukau Police Acting District Commander Inspector Matt Sehoi says the second car fled at speed and the police pursuit continued.
During the pursuit, the passenger has presented a firearm at a number of times at police and members of the public.
Inspector Matt Sehoi says the fleeing car continued to be driven erratically towards Onehunga. Along the way, the passenger pointed a gun out the window at members of the public on multiple occasions. The car finally stopped at the Linux Grove in the suburb of Hillsborough, where the driver has fled towards an area of bush. The passenger got out of the car and presented the firearm at the police. The police have fired at the man and he ran to a nearby house where he again presented the gun and was shot by police.
The public were extremely at risk. I mean, as I say, this was very, very erratic and dangerous behaviour from individuals. And, as I say, our staff needed to put this matter to an end.
The man is now in a serious but stable condition at Auckland City Hospital, along with the driver who suffered minor injuries. The police have set up an online portal for the public to provide information.
Police now have an investigation underway to ascertain the full set of circumstances of what has occurred. As part of this, police are appealing for witnesses to today's events to come forward and assist our inquiries, especially if they have video footage.
Inspector Matt Sehoi says the police are not seeking anyone else in relation to the incident.
Terrible incident to have happen in your street, but as I say, we will be speaking with all those residents and giving them the reassurance that they need. But we can tell them that it has been resolved and there is no further risk.
The police say two firearms have been located, but charges are yet to be laid.
It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And, let's get to some of your feedback. This one on cash. We're asking if you're still using cash because the Reserve Bank is looking at, digital currency. This person says, I'm a 77-year-old male pensioner with small self-employment. I rarely use cash. Instead, I have a Visa debit card and an active Afterpay account. On the other hand, Ian, who describes himself as a lively, fit 74-year-old, uses cash whenever whenever and wherever possible. Quick and efficient, he reckons, no standing and holding up the queue with people stuttering and fumbling about. Another listener says, using cash is a great way to manage your spending. I take out my spending in cash every fortnight, and once it's gone, well, you know the end of that sentence. And Suzanne from Rangiора's got in touch and says, yes, I always carry a bit of cash on me and coins, handy for parking meters and small purchases. Also, she says, after going through the earthquakes in Christchurch, wouldn't be without some cash at all times. Thanks for your feedback. Another benefit sanction is on the scrap heap, but advocates are questioning how long it's taking for the government to make good on its promise to overhaul the welfare system. A law change to remove the so-called subsequent child policy has passed its final hurdle in Parliament. So from November, parents who have another child while on the benefit will no longer be forced to return to work when that child turns 1. But what's next on the Social Development Minister's hit list? Here's our social issues reporter, Sarah Robson.
Introduced in 2012 as part of the national government's welfare reforms, the subsequent child policy was meant to get more people off the benefit and into work. But Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says that didn't happen.
The reality is that I got advice from the Ministry for Social Development to say that there is no evidence to support the fact that it did that in any way.
There are more than 11,000 beneficiaries who are affected by the policy. Ministry of Social Development modelling found no evidence that it reduced parents' time on the benefit or led to better financial or social outcomes. Instead, it disproportionately impacted Māori and women, increased inequity and complexity in the welfare system, and reduced the flexibility for parents to spend time with their tamariki. Beneficiary Advisory Service advocate Tavia Moore says it's also caused a lot of stress.
It's just that impending doom almost, that they kind of are unsure of when things will kick in and when they're not able to fulfil those obligations, that they're just in fear of those negative consequences.
And Tavia Moore says her organisation's research shows sanctions don't help to get people into work.
Clients are focusing far more on the sanction itself rather than what the sanction is meant to achieve.
It's the second benefit sanction to be removed by the government so far. The first was the sanction that docked the payments of parents, mostly women, who didn't name the other parent of their child. Caitlin Newell-Kearns from the Child Poverty Action Group says while the changes are welcome, progress has been frustratingly slow.
The longer that the government waits to implement these things, the more children are kept in chronic stress, which affects their long-term health and well-being.
In its 2019 report, the Welfare Expert Advisory Group recommended the government scrap 6 other benefit sanctions and obligations. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says more work is underway.
2 down, and we're looking at the others, and we'll continue that work. You know, I always say there's more to do, but I'm really clear about the fact that it's doing it one bite at a time and making sure that we do it properly and get through it.
She's also considering advice from officials on the first phase of the review of sanctions and obligations,
which includes looking at social obligations, pre-employment drug testing obligations, and the warrant to arrest sanction. A review of work obligations will be progressed as part of phase 2 of the wider review, and work is already underway to consider this.
The minister says further changes are possible this term.
Psychologists say there's emerging evidence of long-term and in some cases severe effects from time spent in MIQ, brought on by a lack of control, autonomy and social contact. While many returnees relish the 2-week holiday stint, others say they're being caught unprepared for the mental health toll. Katie Todd reports.
Stuck in a strange altered reality, treated as guilty of carrying COVID-19 until proven innocent. Debbie says she had no idea how angry and distressed she'd feel staying at the Crowne Plaza MIQ hotel in July.
I just sat and cried at the wire fence. I actually couldn't move. I had a complete breakdown one day and I couldn't move. I felt like I just couldn't do it, and this was only on day 2.
For Carrie Ann, it was a sense of being lost and unmotivated, and 1 month later, still a bit rattled. Last month, she and her 3-year-old daughter spent 2 weeks in MIQ after a trip to the UK to see her very ill father. She expected it to be a relaxing fortnight, but the rest of the country went into lockdown, and she became fearful of catching the virus after learning about potential transmission at the Crowne Plaza. Carrie Ann struggled without opening windows and was scared to turn on her aircon.
I did break a few times in there. I can see how anybody's mental health would really struggle, especially people with kids, because you are stuck in there and you're also trying to look out for the wellness of your children, yet trying to keep your own sanity yourself.
MIQ officials say there's a mental health clinician at each hotel and nurses available 24/7 if returnees are worried about their wellbeing or someone in their whānau. The welcome pack given to returnees includes free support helplines, websites and services, and nurses are instructed to ask about mental health and wellbeing as part of daily health checks. That doesn't always happen, according to several recent returnees who spoke to RNZ. Debbie says staff at her hotel seemed overworked and too busy to check mental health. Each day they took her temperature, checked for COVID-19 symptoms, and then left. Clinical psychologist Jackie Maguire warns cases like Debbie's and Carrie Ann's are not to be underestimated. She says a study out of King's College in London uncovered some significant psychological impacts among people who'd spent more than 10 days in hotel quarantine. In some cases, the effects were long-lasting.
It can worsen insomnia or bring on insomnia. It can lead to people being irritable, having concentration difficulties, feeling detached from others.
Psychologist Dr Jane Millerchamp says MIQ might seem monotonous and boring, but it's stressful for humans to manage in a state of limbo, with nothing to do and no social contact. She thinks it's important for staff in the hotels to initiate contact and help people to stay connected, because they might not want to ask for help.
When people get depressed and when they get feeling really low or very anxious, people often don't sort of have the initiative to kind of reach out at that point.
Meanwhile, increased pressure on the MIQ system is giving returnees another reason to feel less than okay. Last week, lobby group Grounded Kiwis surveyed 900 people who tried to get a spot in MIQ. Spokesperson Alexandra Burt says those who were successful were well aware of the thousands who'd missed out.
People saying things like they were relieved but then immediately felt so guilty, or people saying they felt like they didn't deserve a voucher or things like that.
Jackie Maguire wants the government to bear mental health in mind when considering future options for MIQ.
Once vaccination rates rise, is it still the best decision? Because we do know that this will be having a psychological impact on people. And is MIQing at home, for example, a better option?
She suggests people going into MIQ do so with realistic expectations and a plan for a daily routine.
The Australian state of Victoria has recorded its highest ever daily COVID total, with another 1,400 cases and 5 deaths. Queensland has recorded 6 new local cases in the past 24 hours, triggering a tightening of restrictions. Meanwhile, as vaccination rates rise in Australia and states slowly start to reopen, the government's pulling back on payments to businesses. However, the decision to cut off funds to hundreds of thousands of businesses is causing alarm. Here's the ABC's Jane Norman.
It's been 7 weeks to the day since the last beer was poured at Frank Condy's popular pub in Canberra.
You know, we've lost 100% of our wage. I'm praying that we don't have another lockdown.
To soften the blow, the ACT and Commonwealth have thrown businesses a lifeline in the form of grants worth up to $60,000.
Well, we haven't received anything that promises of it being there.
6 or 7 weeks in and you haven't received a cent in business support?
No, nothing whatsoever.
And so what impact has that had on you?
It's a huge impact. You know, we're sort of just living off the smell of an oily rag.
In just over a fortnight, Frank Condy should be back in business when the ACT's stay-at-home orders will be lifted. But that's also when business support will start to taper. The Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's phasing out billions of dollars in funding as lockdowns lift and businesses reopen, a move he first flagged last month.
There should be no expectations that the Commonwealth will continue to provide emergency economic assistance to the quantum, to the size and the scale that we're doing right now.
So once the ACT, Victoria and New South Wales reach 80% vaccine coverage, emergency payments for workers and businesses will end. Ines Willix is from the Australian Industry Group.
I think the Treasurer needs to step carefully. The fact that
they are going to withdraw support should not be unexpected and should be supported in many ways, because we can't keep living off the government. But it's not going to be uniform return to work.
Take Frank Condy's pub. Canberra's on track to hit the 80% vaccine target in late October. While the lockdown will have lifted, severe restrictions will remain. And yet there'll be no help from the Commonwealth.
My ground floor, I've got an occupancy of around about 170, 175 people. I'm allowed 25 people. So to say that they're going to reduce any sort of support, it's a bit of a slap in the face, to be honest.
The federal government's hoping that by phasing out its funding, the states and territories will have even more reason to keep their economies open. Ines Willig says it's going to be a rough few months.
I think there's a lot of trepidation among business about what comes next.
Some state leaders are strongly indicating that they will deviate from the national plan. How much is that contributing to this sense of uncertainty and trepidation?
Business thought that there was a plan, but now it seems that there isn't a plan, and there's no agreement around when the reopening will occur and how it will occur. So the COVID recovery looks like it's just going to be a continuation of living through COVID. That is 8 jurisdictions going their own way, and that's going to be deeply problematic for business.
OK, to your feedback now. On the hard border around Auckland, the Prime Minister said it's probably going to stay for a while yet, even if levels shift. Marcia says the Auckland cordon also means that Northland is cordoned off. Good point. A lot of people have pointed to that. On the subject of cash, this listener says, I use cash even in COVID times when contactless or electronic payments are preferred. I'm finding in level 2, it's personal choice at various businesses whether they accept it or not. And another listener from Palmerston North says, I prefer using cash up to $50. Seems silly to use EFTPOS for an ice cream. I have weekly things I go to that have a fee of $3 and $2. They're run by volunteers, and it's impractical to use EFTPOS. Always have $100 cash in my wallet, says this person. Has proved to be helpful many times when EFTPOS is down. Catherine says, except for COVID lockdowns, I use cash for coffee and snacks. It helps me track how much I am spending on frivolous edibles. Is any edible frivolous, Catherine? And then Meg in Auckland says, my teens use cash as they don't have debit or credit cards. It's a bit of a bummer for them at Christmas last year to try and do their shopping in COVID cashless shops. And this one on Tom Walsh and MIQ. Now, Tom Walsh, the shot putter, is going to have to spend quite a few months offshore because of the problems getting in and out of MIQ. Victoria says, seriously, Tom Walsh cannot get an MIQ spot, but the All Blacks and their full management team, no problem. The Wiggles, fill your boots. MIQ is appalling, says Victoria. Wow, ko te kaupapa tuatahi a Pōhopo from 5 a.m. tomorrow morning on First Up. A Northland Dive Company owner counts the cost of no Auckland tourists over the school holidays, with borders set to stay shut. Get up early for that one, 5 o'clock. And we will catch you same place tomorrow.
Kia ora tātou. RNZ News headlines at 6:30.